At the age of 19, Gavin coaxed me into having a taste of forbidden fruit. 6 years later, just as he had coaxed me back then, he held a young and tender intern on his lap. Everyone thought that even if I caught him with another woman with my own eyes, I still wouldn't dare to say the word break up. But this time, I suddenly got tired of it. On a stormy night, I dragged my suitcase and left. After a long time, Gavin casually called, "The rain is too heavy. You can leave tomorrow." I didn't answer. Suddenly, the phone by my ear was taken away. Subconsciously looking back, I was tightly pressed against the floor-to-ceiling window by him. When the call was cut off, Nolan said by my ear, "Elle, the rain is so heavy. Why don't you stay overnight tonight?" When I pushed the door and went in, there was a young girl sitting there. Beige silk shirt, black pencil skirt, the uniform dress for interns in the secretary's office. Slightly mature and intellectual, but it was worn by the little girl in a green way. When the girl saw me, she instantly blushed so much. She struggled to get off Gavin's body, but he just lifted his eyelids and glanced at me infuriantly. But his hands held her even tighter. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." With that handsome face, his coaxing voice was extremely gentle. Suddenly, in a trance, I remembered when I was 19. He coaxed me like this too. Coaxed me to kiss him, hug him, coaxed me to go to a hotel with him to open a room. Coaxed me, "Don't be afraid. Trustingly give myself to him." But now, the same words and the same gentleness, but it was used on a younger girl. I suddenly laughed. The Gavin was reeking of alcohol, with a hazy look in his eyes. "Elle, what are you laughing at?" I slowly suppressed my smile and said softly, "Gavin, let's end it here." After saying that, I didn't wait for him to speak, nor did I pay attention to the suddenly quiet people in the room. I just gently took off the plain ring on my middle finger that I had worn for 5 years and put it on the coffee table in front of Gavin. I turned and walked out. Gavin didn't make a sound to stop me. Naturally, he didn't get up and chase after me either. We had been together for 5 years. He had already become a hot new upstart in Hong Kong City, and I was just a small insignificant anchor on the TV station. So, even if I caught him with another woman with my own eyes, but no one believed that I would say the word break up. When I closed the door, I heard the voices coming from behind. "Sister Elle is just losing face for the moment. Brother Yan, you can coax her well when you go back tonight." "No need." Ivan laughed. "You might as well ask her. Does she dare to break up? For so many years, it is I who gave her a place to stay. It is I who gave her a home." Gavin was calm and superior. "She doesn't dare and is reluctant." I held the doorknob and stood still. I straightened my back, but tears suddenly poured down. When I was young, because he promised me a home, so lonely me was moved and fell. But years later, the once promise has become a sharp sword stabbing at my heart today. Sure enough, the closest people are the ones who know best how to hurt you severely. I spent 3 days packing my luggage at home. During these 3 days, many mutual friends asked me indirectly. I didn't reply. I just packed all my things one by one with a calm heart. On the last night when I was about to leave, I carefully checked the whole house, making sure that not even a single hair of mine was left. Only then did I call a car. After the moving company's truck pulled away all the luggage, suddenly there was a heavy rainstorm in Hong Kong Island. Thunderstorm days are the days I fear the most. When I was young, my parents died in such a late night. And once, on every such rainy night, Gavin would accompany me. I was extremely dependent. But now, it's not needed anymore. A taxi carried me and drove into the pouring rain. I looked at the waterfall like water flow on the car window. I was in a daze. But suddenly the car lost control and broke down. It stopped suddenly. The car behind couldn't avoid it in time and rear-ended. Fortunately, it wasn't serious. I looked back in shock. The rain was so heavy. That Rolls-Royce with double license plates was like an ark on the sea, quietly lying in wait. Before the taxi driver could utter a curse, he suddenly closed his mouth tightly. A black umbrella opened. The man in black business formal attire got out of the car. His noble leather shoes stepped into the rainwater like a stream and walked to my car. The umbrella blocked the pouring rain. Under the umbrella revealed the man's handsome and stern face. I was extremely surprised and opened my eyes wide in astonishment. Nolan? Nolan looked at me expressionlessly. Amusement gradually spread in his eyes. What a coincidence. The car drove into Nolan's private residence basement. As soon as the driver got out of the car, he raised his hand and pinched my chin, and directly kissed me. I was so scared that I dodged desperately and pushed him hard. Nolan directly grabbed my wrist. His voice was extremely cold. When you set me up and tricked me before, did you think about today? My wrist was pinched so painfully, but I had nothing to say in response. I could only mutter apologies. I'm sorry. Nolan. I'm sorry. No matter whether I knew it or not at the beginning, whether it was my intention, but Nolan was calculated that time and his reputation was damaged. It was a real thing that happened. Don't use this sentence to perfunctory me. Last time I didn't even touch you with a finger, but I was charged with rape. Then today, why don't we make this charge true? Nolan raised his hand and wiped the water stains from the corner of my mouth. My face turned pale. I stared at him blankly. Nolan, don't try to make me soft-hearted. He slowly pulled down my shoulder strap. You should be very clear that I am always tough on the outside, and even tougher on the inside. I closed my eyes in despair, thinking of that half-month-long turmoil, thinking that Nolan's name was associated with a rapist from then on, although the matter was suppressed and no one dared to mention it again. But at that time, because of this turmoil, his reputation was damaged and he missed a big project. Finally, it fell to Gavin. So, even if this matter was just a coincidence and a misunderstanding, but Nolan would never believe it. How could a man like him be willing to swallow this grievance? Not here. Okay? I gently pulled his sleeve and begged in a trembling voice without hope. Please. Nolan. Nolan smiled faintly. These words are better left to be said in bed. In fact, in the past year, Gavin and I have rarely shared the same bed. So much so that I almost forgot the taste of love between men and women. So much so that before Nolan and I were completely in harmony, I was already in so much pain that I couldn't help but punch him and bite his arm. Nolan, can you go out first? My whole body was shaking and a layer of sweat oozed on my forehead. But Nolan didn't seem to be feeling well either. He tensed his face. His Adam's apple rolled violently. His voice was deep and hoarse. It seems that your man is no good. Can we not mention him? I lowered my eyes. Gavin and I have broken up. We have no relationship anymore. Nolan suddenly looked at me fixedly. And in the next moment, he who had been unyielding just now, but suddenly retreated and pulled out. I suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. And the knuckles holding his arm also unconsciously loose and a little. But immediately after, Nolan held my waist tightly. The ferocious protruding volcano collided with the molten and scalding magma. My fingertips sank into his flesh. My voice was shattered. Outside, the rain was pouring down. The deafening noise covered all the charming sounds in the room at this moment. In the early hours of the morning, the rain still hadn't stopped. Nolan carried me, who was soaked through, to the floor-to-ceiling window. The phone suddenly rang over and over again, refusing to stop. But it was Gavin who called. I answered with trembling fingers. You moved out. His voice didn't carry any emotion at all. My fingertips were against the cold glass. I responded hoarsely, yes. When? Tonight. The rain is too heavy. You can leave tomorrow. His voice sounded careless. So ridiculous. Before I could answer, the phone by my ear was suddenly snatched away. Looking back subconsciously, Nolan had already pressed me tightly against the floor-to-ceiling window. He glanced at the lit phone screen. By my ear. He cut off the call. The rain is so heavy. Why don't you stay overnight at my house tonight? I shook my head. My soaked hair stuck to my back. Black and white brought a shocking visual impact. Nolan lowered his head and kissed the side of my neck, once more. I didn't refuse. I just asked softly. Is it okay to be even? Nolan's emotions in his eyes suddenly became icy. He smiled. His fingers grabbed my long hair. If you want to be even. It's also possible. The soaked long hair was wrapped around his slender fingers in circles. He exerted a little force to make me stick close to him. The night was deep. But his eyes were deeper than this night. Then let me make that charge true. Only in this way can we be even. My scalp tingled. In fact, Nolan didn't use much force. In fact, before tonight's 2 times, I could feel that he had always been restrained. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have already been torn and injured. After all, the physical gap between the two of us is really a bit too big. If he had the intention to vent his anger, to make that charge true, I am the only one who will suffer. Perhaps it's because we did the most intimate thing between men and women tonight. And once men and women cross that line, many things will change imperceptibly. Somehow, I didn't feel too much fear. I just looked up at him like that and even smiled. Nolan. Then make it true. But there is one thing. I stood on tiptoe slightly and took the initiative to kiss him on the corner of his mouth. I don't want to get hurt. After all, for my job, I need to be on camera. Probably because it was the first time I took the initiative to please him. When he lowered his eyes to my kiss, his voice also became a few tones deeper. You have a second choice. What choice? Be more proactive. Make me feel good. Maybe. I'll let you go. My eyes wide and instantly. Nolan is a bit different from Gavin. His reputation has always been not so good. It is said that his way to the top is not entirely clean. But in recent years, as his business empire has gradually expanded, his person has also gradually shed his air of a worldly person. I still remember when he was interviewed by a financial newspaper last year. Noble and calm, composed and reserved. Even some media people flattered him and praised him as a generation of scholar businessman. Therefore, many people almost forgot. Nolan is not a young master cultivated by a noble family with decades of painstaking efforts. Even more than 10 years ago, he was still making a living at the dock. In his bones, there is no gentlemanly demeanor at all. What? Nolan's lips curved. Afraid? I shook my head. But I couldn't help biting my lip. No. It's just that I don't know how to. Nolan's smile at the corners of his lips gradually faded. After being in a relationship for so many years. Didn't the one surnamed Gu teach you? Before I could speak, Nolan said again. Weren't you quite capable that night? My face instantly flushed red. At that time, I only thought that it was because I was drunk that I lost my composure. But later, I reacted slowly. There was probably something unclean put in my drink. Otherwise, even if I was drunk, I wouldn't do such an ugly thing as holding onto a man and not letting go and taking off his clothes. There should have been something unclean put in my drink at that time. That's why I was like that. Nolan looked down at me. There was no longer any smile on his face. Didn't you ask Gavin what he put in you? I was a bit surprised. Nolan. That matter was just an accident. But after saying this sentence, I couldn't help but feel a little doubtful from the bottom of my heart. I also thought about whether he had calculated me. But at that time, the relationship between Gavin and me hadn't broken down yet. People will always their favorite people deep in their hearts. But now, Gavin and I have completely separated. So, some thoughts suddenly began to change. But Nolan suddenly let go. He looked into my eyes. I'm going to take a shower. After saying that, he directly turned and went to the bathroom. When Nolan came out of the bathroom, I was still standing by the window. The rain had been falling all night. The whole Hong Kong island was engulfed by the swirling water mist. Nothing could be seen outside. I stood there lost in thought. Nolan hugged me from behind. He still had cold moisture on his body. I couldn't help shivering. What are you thinking about? Thinking about what was just said. Nolan sneered. You might as well think about how to make me let you go. Nolan. I'm not in the mood. But before I could finish speaking, he lowered his head and kissed me fiercely. Looking at other men in front of me. Do you think that I was too kind to you twice before? His kiss on me gradually intensified. But there was a layer of frost in his eyes. Suddenly, I was a little afraid. At this moment, Nolan was completely different from before. From his eyes, I could truly feel that this time, he would not show any mercy to me again. Nolan. Survival instinct made me put aside all my dignity. It is said that when Nolan was young, it was because he was ruthless and desperate in doing things that he was favored by a big shot. Thus, he rose rapidly and soared. A person like him would not take human life very seriously. While his kiss, I took the initiative to hug his neck. You just said to let me be proactive. I don't know how. But I will learn. Will you teach me? I will definitely learn seriously. After the long kiss ended, Nolan chuckled. Okay. When sitting astride his muscular waist and abdomen, my face had already flushed so red that it was unseemly. But Nolan raised his hand again and brushed aside my hair that had fallen in front and behind my chest. I bit my lip tightly and wanted to hug my arm to cover my chest. But he grabbed my wrist again. I stared at him in a daze, and tears had already gathered in my eyes. But he was completely unmoved. Nolan's voice was also cold and distant. We've already done it. There's no need to be so coy and cover up. I shook my head with tears in my eyes. I can't do it. Nolan. Please. Don't force me. I really can't. I lowered my head and tears dropped on his chest one by one. Afraid that he would be angry, I struggled to pull out my hand to wipe them away. But he held on even tighter. Nolan didn't speak. Just looking at the woman sitting astride him and silently shedding tears. She was not extremely beautiful. Her figure was also a bit too thin. Her personality was not particularly pleasing either. She would easily turn red in the eyes and shed tears. Whenever he said something a bit harshly, she would be like she had received a great shock. As if he could kill her at any time. And she also had a boyfriend who had just broken up after 6 years. Nolan frowned slightly. He had never thought of getting involved with such a woman. But absurdly, after that attempted rape incident. Incredibly, he often thought of that night. Remembering how she took off his clothes and straddled him. Remembering how he held her wrists to stop her from making trouble, and how she shed tears in grievance. If it was said that he was attracted by her beauty. Over the years, there had been countless women who wanted to throw themselves at him. There were also those who stripped naked and stuck to him. But he had never had such a reaction. Even later, he often regretted. Why didn't he go with the flow that night? And just make that charge true. Having people keep an eye on Elle and Gavin 24 hours a day. From the minute she moved out of Gavin's house, he was like a stalker and followed her car. The moment he took Elle away, he attributed everything to his desire for revenge. But he couldn't help caring about her feelings and experience. Even before those 2 times, he had been restraining himself. He didn't completely indulge. Even so, Elle still seemed to have suffered a great injustice. Just now, she was still making excuses for Gavin. That scumbag. In fact, at that time, he really wanted to throw her directly into the heavy rain outside to make her completely awake. But in the end, he went to take a cold shower in the bathroom. Nolan looked down on himself very much. Since he was young, he felt that how could a man be controlled by a woman? He definitely wouldn't be soft-hearted this time. But when Elle lowered her head and shed tears, his heart was softened by her tears again. Nolan raised his hand. His slightly rough fingertip landed on Elle's full lips. She was petite and thin, but that cherry-colored little mouth had full and slightly fleshy lips. The feeling of kissing was really good. So that compared to having sex with her, he seemed to like kissing her more. And he liked making her cry and dirtying her more. What are you crying for? Nolan pinched my chin. I had to raise my face. But tears rolled down again. I just said a few words to you. You haven't done anything yet. Nolan wiped away the tears from the corner of my eye. You are crying like this. People who don't know will think that I really raped you. I'm sorry. I stared at him in a daze. But the tears couldn't be stopped. All right. Nolan suddenly sat up straight and picked me up from him again. He casually pulled over a thin quilt and wrapped me up. If you don't cry now, we'll sleep. I couldn't believe it. I stared at him with wide eyes filled with tears and didn't move at all, like I was stupid. Nolan curved his lips. What? I shook my head vigorously and immediately closed my eyes. Nolan also lifted the quilt and lay down. I subconsciously curled up my body and wanted to stay away from him. But Nolan directly pulled me into his arms. Al. Behave and don't move around when sleeping. Otherwise, if you start a fire, you are responsible for putting it out. Got it. I lay down obediently. I didn't dare to move at all until Nolan's breathing became stable. Only then did I tentatively and carefully move my almost stiff body. But just as I was about to get out of his arms, Nolan flipped over and pressed me under him. Al. I said not to seduce me. I didn't. If I say there is, there is. In the darkness. Nolan lowered his head and kissed me. He seemed to especially like kissing. And this kiss was extremely long. When the kiss ended, I suddenly realized. I don't know when. Nolan and I had already been deeply in harmony. And this time, the experience was obviously different from the previous 2 times. I was a little frightened and grabbed his arm tightly. Nolan. It was really too deep. I was so scared that my whole body was trembling uncontrollably. Nolan's strong and powerful arms supported on both sides of my body. He leaned down and his breath brushed past my ear. Has he been here? Tears gushed out like a bursting dam in my eyes. But I couldn't tell if it was physiological pleasure, or fear and dread from never having had such an experience. But the fingers holding his arm had already become weak. I felt like Hong Kong Island soaked by the heavy rain. In the next second, it would be torn apart by that powerful external force. The sound of the rain was noisy. In the dim room, Nolan suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it on his abdomen. On his tight muscles, there were all water marks. L. His voice was hoarse and deep, but also carried a hint of satisfaction. Look, you are more powerful than the heavy rain outside. I was in a daze. Just like a small boat drifting with the waves on the turbulent sea. I didn't understand his words. I only felt that the small boat of mine would be smashed by the waves in the next second. The rain in Hong Kong Island was so heavy but it didn't wet me. But you made me soaked all over. L. How do you say you will compensate? When I woke up again, it was already sunny after the rain. Nolan was not in the room. I went to the bathroom and soaked in the bathtub for a long time. But my mind was still in a mess. When I came out of the bathroom and charged and turned on my phone, countless text messages and missed calls poured in. There were several from Gavin. I didn't call back. I just deleted all his contact information. I had taken leave before. I didn't need to go to work at the TV station for a few days. The moving company had also delivered all my luggage to the newly rented small apartment. The rented room of less than 20 square meters cost nearly $20,000 per month. For me, it was a huge expense. Fortunately, the Bavon had been quite generous to me over the years. I had also saved some money, and didn't have to worry about daily life. The only trouble now was Nolan. But after going downstairs, I didn't see him at all. After having a meal in the restaurant, I tentatively proposed to leave. The servants of the Shen family didn't stop me either. Instead, they sent a driver to take me. I thought about it all the way. Finally, I came to a conclusion. The debt between me and Nolan should be evened. This conclusion made me breathe a sigh of relief. Being even is a good thing. After all, a man like Nolan is really too difficult to serve. If we were together every night, my life would be in danger. The newly rented apartment was not big and I didn't have much luggage either. In just half a day, everything was put in order. The small one-bedroom apartment was enough for me to live in, although it was not as luxurious as Gavin's large flat. But now lying on my own small bed, I was at ease. The afternoon sun was very warm. I fell asleep at some point. In my dream, I returned to that year when I was 19. Gavin coaxed me. In the hotel room, we had a taste of forbidden fruit. Afterward, I kept crying, because of the pain and also because of fear. He held me tightly. The plain ring was put on my hand. When you graduate, we'll get married. I shed tears in my dream. But I knew very clearly in my heart that those tears were not shed for Gavin, but for the silly Elle at 19. For the lonely Elle who longed for a home. After deleting all of Gavin's contact information, he never looked for me again. I also faded out and stayed away from those circles we used to be in, so I hardly heard any news about him anymore. When the holiday ended, I went back to work at the TV station. But suddenly I heard of very unexpected news. Selena, another female anchor who had never been on good terms with me, actually invited Gavin, the new upstart in Hong Kong Island now, to her show. The whole TV station was in an uproar. After all, almost everyone in Hong Kong Island knew Gavin never participated in any shows. He never even accepted interviews. I sat at my desk, a little stunned. At first, because the schedule of my show was too cold and the ratings were not good. It was almost cancelled by the TV station. At that time, Gavin had just emerged. Because he was handsome and charming, he was very popular. The leaders of the TV station tried several times to invite him to be on the show, or accept an interview, but were all rejected. I also had such an idea. I even just asked him to accept a written interview without showing his face, and not disclose our relationship. Gavin also refused me. But now, he was going to be on Selena's show. And he didn't put forward any harsh conditions. The questions prepared by the TV station were also very comprehensive, including the emotional questions that the audience liked the most. But he clearly knew that Selena and I had a very bad relationship. When we started our internship after graduation, she had always wanted to step on me. Gavin did it on purpose, right? But I couldn't figure it out. He had someone else in his heart and a new love. I broke up and moved out to make room for the new person. Shouldn't he thank me? Since I couldn't figure it out, I stopped thinking about it. In any case, this was also Selena's own ability and luck. At present, I had no other way. I could only do my job well first. But in the afternoon, I received a rejection from the manager of the new movie Queen again. I wasn't surprised. After all, this show had always been lukewarm. Most of the guests we could invite were only unknown celebrities. We have to think of a way quickly. Selena's show this time will definitely be a hit. Then it will be natural to cancel our column. I know. I'll think of a way. My partner sighed and shook his head again. Selena is really lucky. In fact, originally the TV station was going to cancel her column. Who knew that she could invite Gavin? Do you think there is something going on between her and Gavin? I thought for a while. I heard that Gavin has a girlfriend. Selena should have nothing to do with him, right? But I was quickly slapped in the face. In the afternoon, Selena received 999 red roses. At 6 o'clock when work was over, Gavin's Bentley was parked right at the main entrance downstairs of the TV station. Selena changed into a very beautiful strapless dress and happily got into Gavin's car. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I scrolled through Selena's ins. The restaurant that Gavin took her to was my favorite revolving restaurant. There were 3 dishes in the photo. All my favorites. The slender fingers of the man holding the knife and fork still had a plain ring on the middle finger. I had seen it for 6 years, and was extremely familiar with it. It was Gavin's. I smiled, put down my phone and went to take a shower. When I came out of the bathroom, a former friend suddenly called. I pressed the answer button. What came to my ear was Gavin's voice. His voice was a little cold, and clearly tinged with drunkenness. Move back. If you do, I'll be on your show. I couldn't help laughing. Gavin. I decided on the day I left that I won't go back anymore. You should be very clear. If I really go on Selena's show, your column will be cancelled and you will lose your job. So what? Gavin's voice suddenly became gentle. I have fired that intern. Also, I didn't touch her. You have no family. Your relatives are also very distant. You should be very clear that only I am your reliance. Gavin. I thought so before. But now, I don't need it anymore. Don't be so headstrong. Don't call me again in the future. After saying that, I hung up the phone. My friend's phone was also put on the blacklist by me. Those friends were originally Gavin's friends. Since we broke up, there is naturally no need to continue contacting. The phone suddenly rang again. It was a strange number. Naturally, I thought it was Gavin calling and directly hung up and blacklisted it. After a moment, another strange number sent a message. Try hanging up on me again. I was a little stunned and replied, "Excuse me. Who is this?" The phone called again soon. I hesitated for a moment and picked it up. But it was Nolan's voice. Your courage is getting bigger and bigger. Sorry. I didn't know it was your call. Then whose call did you think it was? Gavin's? Yes. The phone was suddenly hung up. I was a little puzzled. But I didn't call back. Until I was almost asleep. That number called again. Opened the door. My bedroom is very small. And the bed is even smaller. The bathroom is also pitifully small. Nolan came in after taking a shower. Looking at my bed, he frowned. I'll sleep on the sofa. I stood up and was about to go out. The single bed of 1 meter 2 is cramped for him alone to sleep on. But Nolan directly closed the bedroom door. I came to sleep with you. Not with the bed. My face was a little hot. Keep your voice down. Don't talk nonsense. This house is not soundproof. Nolan took off the bath towel and threw it aside. He looked down at me and said, "You should be the one to keep your voice down." When pressing me on the bed, Nolan said again, "Cry softly too. So that the neighbors won't hear and think I'm raping and killing." I really couldn't help but glare at him. "Can you stop mentioning these 2 words? Nolan took off my nightgun while saying inferently and curved his lips, "Isn't it all because of you?" I had nothing to say in response and could only shut up. The bed was too small to move freely. The house was not soundproof. I clenched my lips and didn't make a sound. Nolan was not satisfied. "Tomorrow you move. Don't live here anymore." "Move where? I can't afford a better house. You know the housing prices in Hong Kong City. I'll buy you a house." Nolan lowered his head and kissed me again. "Move tomorrow." I was just about to refuse. But Nolan said another sentence. "If you move obediently, I'll be on your show." Really? Of course it's true. But there is one thing. The interview questions will be provided by me. The news that Nolan would be on my show spread in the TV station the next day. And what made everyone even more excited was the nuclear-level blockbuster news brought by Nolan's secretary. Nolan will officially announce a piece of good news on the show. The only thing I can reveal is that it is good news in terms of emotions. The leaders of the TV station were almost crazy with joy. My partner was also extremely excited. A legendary big shot like Nolan participating in a TV show and an interview for the first time in his life. This is 100 times more interesting than Gavin being on the show. After all, more than 10 years ago, Nolan was still moving goods at the dock. Now he is a big shot who stirs up the situation in Hong Kong Island. Who isn't extremely curious about such a man? After the excitement subsided, I made myself a cup of coffee. Sitting at my desk, I was in a daze by myself for a while. Nolan will officially announce a piece of good news on the show. If I guess correctly, it should be related to his marriage. Who will be his fiancé? Now there are countless socialites in Hong Kong City who favor him. Several prominent families have intentions of forming an alliance with him through marriage. Nolan's background is not very good, although he is successful in his career now. But in terms of foundation, he still can't compare with those wealthy families. He should marry a young lady from a wealthy background. Right? Naturally. All this has nothing to do with me. But last night, he said he would buy me a house and let me move there. So, is he asking me to be his mistress? Although I am insignificant and just an ordinary small anchor at the TV station. But even if it's Nolan, I can't do such a thing as being a mistress. Even if I follow him, I can reach the sky in one step. I didn't move into the house that Nolan gave me. The next day, I submitted my resignation letter to the TV station again. Rejecting Nolan, the show will naturally fail. This time I am still defeated by Selena. Instead of waiting for the show to be cancelled, it's better to resign on my own. But the expression of the leader of the TV station was a little strange. "Elle, you really can't resign now." "Why?" "Because Gavin will also be on your show. He pushed off Selena's show and wants to be on your show with Nolan." And at the same time, I was completely stunned. Is it Gavin who is crazy, or did I hear wrong? Elle, Nolan has already agreed. Moreover, Evan will also officially announce a piece of good news on the show. If this news is released, the whole Hong Kong city will be shocked. Elle, this is a great blessing. After this show is broadcast, you will become famous and popular overnight. The leader handed me the resignation letter. Take back your resignation letter quickly. Go back and prepare well. Tomorrow we will start recording the standby broadcast. You must be in your best state. On the way back to the office, I met Selena. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had just cried. When she saw me, she almost gritted her teeth in hatred. "Elle, it's all your fault. You bitch. It's all you. You have ruined everything for me. Evan is clearly your boyfriend. But you let him play with me like this. What's on your mind? How can there be such a vicious woman like you?" Selena seemed to go crazy suddenly. She grabbed a flower pot and threw it at me. Wearing high heels, I almost tripped over the carpet while dodging. I could only helplessly hug my head. But the flower pot didn't hit me. Nolan came somehow. He stood in front of me. That flower pot hit him on the forehead and soon blood flowed. The TV station was in a mess. Selena was pulled out by the security guards. Someone called an ambulance. I sat on the ground in a daze, covering Nolan's wound on his forehead. Blood gushed out from between my fingers, warm and sticky. My consciousness gradually returned bit by bit. "Nolan." I called his name in a daze. And then tears fell. Maybe it was because the tears were falling too fiercely. Nolan twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled. "Al, why are you crying again? Don't talk. You are bleeding." "Nolan. So, why are you crying when I'm bleeding?" I couldn't answer. I just looked at his face full of blood and kept shedding tears. Nolan was sent to the emergency room for stitches. I sat on the bench in the corridor in a daze, until he was pushed to the ward by the nurse and called me over. I looked at the gauze on his forehead and the bandage. Such a tall and strong man, now lying there. His face was a little weak and pale. "Does it hurt?" I asked him in a low voice while holding back tears. "Do you want some water?" Nolan nodded and then shook his head. "Use it here." I obediently sat down beside him. "Elle, kiss me." "Huh? Come here and kiss me." "Nolan, you are still injured. It's just an injury on the forehead." I'll pour you a glass of water." I stood up to leave. But Nolan suddenly let out a low groan. I was startled and quickly went to look at the wound on his forehead. But Nolan wrapped his arms around my waist and directly brought me into his arms. He raised his face and kissed me, and then went deeper without restraint. The kiss became deeper and deeper until I was out of breath. "Elle, why are you so kissable?" Nolan's finger rubbed over my slightly swollen lips. Suddenly he said something vulgar in a low voice. My face instantly flushed red and I pushed him away. Don't even think about it. Nolan somewhat helplessly raised his eyebrows. Can't I even think about it? Thinking about it is not allowed either. I glared at him. Rogue. Hooligan. You're right to scold me. 13 years ago. I was indeed a rogue. I won't talk to you anymore. Nolan suddenly smiled. I'm injured. Cook some soup for me tonight. Let your servants cook. After saying that, I actually regretted it. In any case, Nolan was injured because of me. I only know how to make the simplest lily and tremella soup. Coincidentally, that's my favorite soup. Then I'll make it for you tonight. Nolan's smile at the corners of his mouth deepened. Okay. Then make it well tonight. I always felt that there was something wrong with what he said. But then I felt that it should be that I was overthinking. But at night when I made soup for him, after he drank 2 big bowls, and then said he was dizzy and asked me to help him back to his room, I knew that I really wasn't wronging this rogue who was always thinking about doing that. And that night was also the first time in my life that I took the initiative. Took the initiative to help him take off his clothes and take a bath. Took the initiative to sit astride his waist and abdomen. But I was lack of exercise and didn't have enough strength. However, after just a few minutes, I started acting shamelessly and refused to move anymore. Nolan wasn't annoyed. Maybe it was because of his injury. Tonight was rather gentle. But I liked it very much. In the end, I fell asleep comfortably in his arms. I didn't even remember how I took a bath. When I woke up the next day, Nolan was still sleeping. I stood by the bed and looked at him for a while, and thought about a lot of things. Originally, when I knew that he was about to get engaged, I had decided not to get entangled with him anymore. But yesterday he was injured because of me. This night, let's call it even. It seems that from the very beginning, between me and Nolan, either thinking about how to be even or considering how to settle. But in any case, it can be considered that there is a beginning and an end. I didn't wake him up. After taking a shower, I left Nolan's villa. Selena was taken away by the police. She may face detention. I submitted my resignation letter again. When I came out of the TV station, I met Gavin. He called me. Standing in the bright summer sun. Still handsome and charming. But it was no longer the way I used to love. Are you resigning? Yes. Don't you like this job very much? I do really like this job. But now, I am truly exhausted both mentally and physically. Without any backing and refusing to accept unspoken rules. Then I can only sit on the bench. And if I rely on men to climb up, I will always be talked about and be inferior. It's better not to do it. I have never approved of you going out to work. It's hard and the salary is low. Gavin walked up to me. Isn't it good to be a full-time wife? When I first made money, I told you, I don't want my wife to go out and work hard. Now, since you have resigned, then come home with me. From now on, I will support you. He naturally held my hand. It was as if he had never been ambiguous with that intern. Had never slept with another woman. We had never been separated at all. The sun gradually became dazzling. I couldn't help squinting. I thought, how could Gavin change beyond recognition to such an extent? I pulled out my hand. Gavin, we broke up long ago. Come on. I know I made you angry last time. But after so long, your anger should have subsided. I'm not angry. I looked at him calmly. Gavin, I'm serious. The smile on his face finally dissipated little by little. You are already 25 years old. Don't be so headstrong and childish. Without a job and leaving me, how will you survive in Hong Kong City in the future? Seeing that I didn't speak, he softened his tone again. Didn't you always want to marry me and have a family? I have prepared the wedding house. It's the mountaintop villa on Barker Road that we saw before. Decorate and arrange it according to what you like. Okay? I wanted to refuse. But before I could say anything, Nolan's voice suddenly sounded not far away. So, L. The reason you refused to move into the house I gave you is because the house he gave you is bigger than mine? Nolan was leaning on the car like that, with a cigarette in his mouth, looking like a rogue. The wound on his head was probably touched. A piece of bright red seeped through the bandage. I instantly frowned. You can't smoke now. Nolan took off the cigarette but didn't put it out. But as far as I know, the largest mountaintop villa on Barker Road was bought by me. The one he bought is not as big as mine. L. Think carefully. Don't pick up a sesame seed and lose a watermelon. Gavin's face was livid. Nolan. What do you mean? Nolan spread his hands. Isn't it obvious? I'm giving a house to my woman. Your woman? Gavin suddenly clenched his teeth. When did she become your woman? Nolan smiled. Didn't you send her to me yourself back then? Gavin's expression suddenly changed. But Nolan didn't waste any more words with him. The wine and drinks that Elle had drunk before, I had people keep them properly. Now they have all been sent to the police. Mr. Gu, if you are innocent, then the law will naturally clear you. But if you are really the culprit, then the law will never let you go. Neither will I. Nolan stubbed out his cigarette. At this time, the police car had also arrived. He didn't say anything more, passing by Gavin with a dejected look on his face. He walked up to me. Elle, I have been a good person for nearly 5 years. Now, can I like you? The hot wind blew. Almost completely annihilated memories suddenly rushed in. It was a girl who had just lost her parents in a shipwreck. It was a delinquent teenager who made a living by his sweat and blood at the dock. Two people who shouldn't have intersected originally suddenly had an intersection because of that incident. The uneasy girl wiped the blood off the injured teenager's face during a fight, and put the cartoon band-aid in her school bag on the wound on his forehead. In a daze, the teenager grabbed her snow-white skirt and wouldn't let go. She, who was soft-hearted and kind, held him and sat on the dirty ground and never left. Later, when they separated, the teenager asked the thin and slender girl, "What's your name? Can I look for you in the future? Can I like you?" The girl stuffed all the band-aids and small change in her school bag to him. Hearing this, she just pursed her lips and smiled. Then you have to be a good person. Boys who fight can't like me. And I won't like them either. Can I like you if I become a good person? Of course. Being liked by someone is also a very happy thing. She waved at him. I have to go. I will never come here again. She lost her parents and had to stay with relatives. She had to leave here, go to a new school and start a new, completely different life. Later, when she grew up, she had already forgotten that little incident. She also met a good-looking boy she liked. She stupidly gave her heart. But in the long river of time, there was a person who never forgot her for a minute. No one knew how much he had suffered to get to where he is today, to make himself a good person. But at that time, the person in his heart already had someone she liked. But even so, he never thought of looking for another woman or liking someone else until that night. Until that accident happened. In fact, with such clumsy means, a person like him who had experienced countless storms could see through it at a glance. But at that time, there was only one thought in his mind. He couldn't let her get hurt or be sad. So he swallowed that grievance. He didn't take revenge on Gavin. Not until the person who had been following her said that she was packing her luggage and was about to move out of Gavin's house. Not until he saw her leave with a suitcase in his own eyes. He couldn't bear to wait any longer. He took her back to his home. It's you? Almost blurred memories gradually recovered and became clear. But the Nolan in front of me and that teenager with a crew cut and tattoos on his arm couldn't overlap no matter what. Your tattoo. It was washed off long ago. It's just that there was no money back then and scars were left. Nolan rolled up his sleeve and let me see his arm. There were indeed several clear scar marks. Elle, you haven't answered me yet. Nolan's expression was extremely serious. Are you sure you are a good person now? What kind of good person would be like you? Nolan frowned slightly. L. He took a step forward and directly lowered his head and kissed me. You are the most obedient when I kiss you. In broad daylight. With people coming and going. I reached out to push him away. But he covered his head wound again and groaned. L. My wound hurts. I was immediately so scared that I didn't dare to move. Nolan kissed me contentedly for a while and then said, Will you cook soup for me tonight? Don't even think about it. L. Why is your mind full of unhealthy things? I just want you to cook soup for me. There is no other meaning at all. Nolan looked extremely serious. I couldn't help but wonder if I was really having dirty thoughts. Really? Nolan nodded very seriously. I got into his car with some doubts. After cooking the Lily and Trem Ellis soup, he drank 2 big bowls again. Then, pretending to be dizzy because of his injury, he tricked me into helping him go upstairs. This help led to the bed. When he held me on his lap, I raised my hand to stop him. Nolan, you said before that you would officially announce a piece of good news. What is it? There are some things I have to ask clearly. After all, even if I am a little attracted to him, even if we had a connection when we were young, but I don't want to be a third party and live in the dark. If he really wants to marry someone else, then if we break up now, it won't be too painful. Nolan lay on the bed and looked at me, frowning. L. With me like this, you still have the mind to ask these? I glanced down and couldn't help swallowing. But I am a very principled person. Some questions must be asked clearly. Will you say it? If you don't say it, I will leave now. Chen Shang pinched my waist and pressed me down directly. What else could it be? I'm 28. Naturally, I want to get married. Marry who? The woman who took off my pants when we met for the first time after so many years. Nolan. I was so angry that I rushed over to hit him. Nolan looked at me with a smile and didn't dodge, letting me hit him several times. Have you hit enough? He slowly sat up and gave a very light slap on my buttocks. Now it's my turn to hit. Nolan. I glared at him angrily. But Nolan lowered his head and kissed me very gently. L. I have liked you for many years.